Okay, so let's continue. Let's talk about the concept of state. The state is the most powerful and successful political organization that has ever existed. Understanding its features and evolution is essential. Again, I know that you have basic knowledge already of what state is. I'm sure also that you have knowledge about the different elements of the state, the parameters of each element, the concept, the definition of each element, etc. All states have four defining qualities. We have population, legitimacy, territory, and sovereignty. But again, as I've said, no, it's different from what we have learned, because in comparative politics, we excluded or we omitted government as an element of the state, but rather we are replacing it with the term legitimacy. The modern state was born in Europe, and its form was exported to the rest of the world by imperial powers such as Britain, France, and Spain. So this is a very, very, very basic um, discussion of comparative politics, because logically you cannot really compare one system to another, or one state to another, without knowing the definition of a state. Okay, so that's why here we have to deal about the definition of state in a deeper way, no, or we have to have a deeper understanding of its concept. States are formally equal but vary dramatically in, among other attributes, their size, economic importance, international significance, and even the extent to which they control their territory. So a state actor is one of the most important actors in international politics. We know politics, right? Okay. So politics can be present within the national sphere, in the Philippines, in America, in Canada, in Japan. But there's also international politics. That is the relationship and the interaction or the communication between one state, which of course, no, there's a presumption that it possesses the four elements of the state, because you cannot be recognized under international community without achieving or without possessing these four elements: the people, territory, government, sovereignty, or people, territory, legitimacy, or sovereignty. So nations and state are central concepts in comparative politics. Later on, we will know what's the difference between state and nation. Although these terms are sometimes used interchangeably, they denote separate entities that can overlap in several ways. Of course, there are also historical backgrounds that we need to study on. There are also terminologies that we need to consider before we can classify these two concepts. Same with comparative politics, no? It's not easy as you think that okay, si kuan, si Philippines kay capitalistic, si Russia kay murag socialist iyahang orientation, no? Yes, that's correct. But again, comparative politics is much more deeper than that. The condition of the modern state is open to question. Some argue that states are as strong as ever, some that they are declining, and some that they are simply evolving. Before the modern state, government mainly consisted of kingdoms, empires, and cities. These units were often governed in a personal and highly centralized fashion, lacking the idea of an abstract political community. Again, people during this time have no idea of what a state is, what a community is, what a society is. Focus on a defined territory which characterizes today's states. So of course, in a nomadic way of living, okay, people existed already, okay, and their form of gaining or having resources are not in a form of trade. Wala may importation or exportation of product back then. Okay, what we had, magkatay ka og animals, no? Okay, mamana ka sa sapa or sa dagat. Okay, that's a nomadic way of living. Okay, wala may car sa una, wala cellphone, wala internet. Okay, until such time that it grew, that the community has been divided already by communities, and these communities have reached, okay, the status of becoming barangay or balangay, and then until such time that we have reached this stage of what we are currently living. States today have a quite different and more complex relationship with one another than they did even 2 generations ago. Their interactions inevitably influence domestic, political, and economic calculations. Questions about their true independence are raised with increased frequency. That's why the study of comparative politics is quite complicated, because unlike in some subjects in political science, comparative politics talks about the systems, not just the system, but the structure, even the behavior of the people, okay, the history of the state, okay, the language of the state, and many others. Unlike, for instance, in international relations, that you will just know how states interact, okay, what are treaties, what are executive agreements, etc., etc. But for comparative politics, we will be comparing generally, okay, and specifically, both generally and specifically, the distinctions of the system in one state compared to the other state. Before the modern state, government mainly consisted of kingdoms, empires, and cities. You already know that. In essence, the state defines the political community of which government is the managing agent. By successfully claiming a monopoly of authorized force, the state creates a mandate for rule, which the government then puts into effect. Okay, that's why there could be no powerful entity, okay, stronger than the state, because the state creates government, okay, and the government is the one making mandate to the people on what rules to follow, on what policies to follow, on what programs of the government that they could implement in order to help the people, for the survival of the people, for the purchase of our resources, etc., etc. Okay, that's why government is the managing agency. It is consist of different um, uh, agencies, different bureaus. For example, Department of Health, Department of Education. Ito yung mga example ng government, no? We also have different local government units, municipality, city. In the case of America, since they are federal, then we call it, they have different county, state, no, because they're federal, okay, and the state consists of different cities, etc. This distinction between state and government is reflected in the characteristic separation in many countries of the roles of head of the state. We have the monarch or non-executive president. So again, no, in a monarchical system of government, there are actually two heads. Okay, we have the monarch or the king or the queen or the emperor. We also have the prime minister. Okay, just like the Great Britain. But unlike in the Philippine government, unlike in a presidential form of government wherein the president serves as the head of the government and the head of the state, but in the case of monarchical form of government, the king or the queen is merely symbolic, meaning he or she is a mere symbolic head of the state. But who is the head of government in a monarchical form of government? It's of course the prime minister. Okay. Okay. Such in the case of Great Britain, we have Queen Elizabeth, and their prime minister is Theresa May. Okay. So let's talk about the qualities of the state or elements of the state. We have population. States contain populations without whom the territory concerned little more than a block of real estate. So these are the people which are considered, rather, to be inhabitants of the state. Mga tao. Okay. Legitimacy. States are normally recognized both by their residents and by other states as having jurisdiction and authority within their territory. So you might be asking, what's the difference between government and legitimacy? Okay. Legitimacy is a entirely different thing. Okay. Because I submit that government is already included in the term sovereignty. Because in the case of the Philippines, the sovereignty resides in the people, right? No, under the Constitution. So without that sovereignty, there can be no government. Okay, or the government would be futile, or no government at all. Okay, because it's the sovereign, which is the people. It's the sovereign which creates the government, which makes the government works. Okay, We also have territory. States operate within a fixed territory marked by borders and control the movement of people, money, and goods across the borders. So there's really, of course, no requirement for a territory, no? The size of the territory. Wala man nag-ingon nga dapat 100,000 square kilometer. Dapat 10,000 square kilometer ang size sa estado para ma-consider nimo ang isa ka entity as a state, no? It should be sufficient enough to, of course, no, cater the inhabitants of the state. We also have sovereignty. States have sovereignty over the territory, its people, and resources, meaning that they have the sole authority to impose laws and taxes. Because if the entity do not have this kind of powers, do not possess this kind of authorities, then that entity is not sovereign at all, or we will be living in an anarchism. Okay, so sovereignty is the most vital element of the state. Sovereignty, again, is the ultimate source of authority in a society. The sovereign is the highest and final decision maker within a community. That's why do we have laws? Why do we have policies? Why do we have ordinances? Because of the sovereign capacity of our government. Okay. Why do we have external sovereignty? Meaning we cannot be interfered by our neighboring state. Why can't they intervene with the national affairs of the Philippines? Okay. Ultimately, because we are a sovereign nation. And no state, no matter how powerful you are, no matter how economically and politically stable you have, you cannot intervene to a humble but sovereign state. No, bisag unsa pa ka kapobre, bisag unsa pa ka unstable ang imong politics, okay? Bisag unsa pa ka less equipped ang imong military equipments or military power, then again, it is not a guarantee nor a license for your neighboring state to interfere with your affairs, internal affairs. Right. Okay. So let's ask ourselves, how many states are there? No, a benchmark point of reference is the membership roster of the United Nations. Under the UN class, there are at least 193 as of 2015 recognized states. Okay, but this number includes 4 small European enclave states. We have Andorra, Liechtenstein, Monaco, and San Marino. But insofar as comparative politics is concerned, and by applying the 4 qualities of a state, we have people, territory, legitimacy, and sovereignty. Okay, they do not form part, or they do not, again, they're not covered within the realm of how we define state, which meet the legal definition of the state but play a minimal role in the interstate relations, and are for all practical purposes parts of the larger states that surround them. For purposes of comparative politics, there are only 189 states, but for purposes of the roster of the United Nations, which is the largest organization, we have 193 states. You got that? Okay, let's talk about the emergence of the state system. The state emerged from the members of medieval Europe. Okay, in the Middle Ages, European governance had been dominated by the transnational Roman Catholic Church and powerful feudal lords. So if there was any single force that was responsible for the transition to the modern state, of course, it's war. Okay, as Tilly wrote, war made the state, and the state made war, because when the state itself is created, there will be borders. And when there will be borders, there will be barriers. And if there will be barriers, there might be conflict which may arise because of, for example, the, let's say, greed of resources, okay, conflict of the policies, because states do have different policies. States do have different protocols or rules that they follow. That's why UN was created particularly in order to prevent the occurrence of war. Okay. The introduction of gunpowder in the 14th century transformed military scale and tactics as organized infantry and artillery replaced the knight on horseback. Okay. You can supplement your, just read the materials I uploaded. The birth of the modern state system is often tied to a single event. That's the 1648 Peace of Westphalia. This brought an end to both the 30 Years' War in the Holy Roman Empire and the 80 Years' War between Spain and Dutch Republic. So again, after the Peace of Westphalia, doon na, okay, World War I and then World War II. After the World War I, League of Nations was created. We also have the Treaty of Versailles has been agreed by the states, and then however the League of Nations failed to prevent another war. So nagka-gera, World War II. Okay, although World War II occurred at a very, very short period of time. But when it comes to casualty, halos sobra or equal pa no ang casualty nga nahitabo sa World War I. Because World War I was way, way long, okay, compared to World War II. Okay, but the casualty is more than or equal to that of the First World War. So as you can see, there have been a lot of attempts, okay, to have peace, to acquire peace. Okay, but these mechanisms were unsuccessful. Okay, and when we say unsuccessful, conflicts went out, no, between these states, and that's why there was conflict. Yun, nagkagera, nagkagulo. Okay, and in the current system, and after the Second World War in 1945, doon na the United Nations was established, the World Bank was established, the International Monetary Fund, as well as the GATT, which is the World Trade Organization now. Okay, they were created in order to, formulate policies, a uniform policies for all the international community, for all the members of international or the global community. Westphalian system is the modern state system that many believe emerged out of the 1648 Peace of Westphalia based on the sovereignty of states and political self-determination. Kasi dati, they do not know whether state sila. Uy, estado ba mi? Or is there such thing as a state back then? None. No, wala. Okay? So wala sila kabalo kung asa ba kutob ang amo ang territory, asa ba kutob ang boundary, asa may barrier diri. Okay? And until such time, okay, that these societies have created barriers, have created borders. Kung nanay borders, naka-divide na ang each territory, then doon na nabuo ang estado. Okay? And because of these so-called barriers, you cannot, of course, just enter another entity or another state without its permission. That's why doon na lumabas si passport, si visa. Okay? Kailangan na kung adto ka sa isa ka country, kailangan ni mag visa, kailangan ni mag passport. Otherwise, you will be deported automatically by the government because we already have barriers. Okay? And these barriers, again, one of the misconceptions of globalization, because we'll be talking about globalization later. Some people would understand globalization in a manner na it is as if there is no barrier at all. It is as if because of globalization, borders have been eliminated. But no, that is not true at all. Because again, we have distinct policies. We have distinct immigration rules. That's why we require visa, we require passport, no? Kailangan ni mga papeles once you enter the or visit another state. Because that's what we call, or that's the manifestation na, uy, you are entering our border. Therefore, you have to submit yourself to the policies of our government. Okay? So the French philosopher Jean Bodin argued that within society, a single sovereign authority should be responsible for 5 major functions: legislation, war and peace, public appointments, judicial appeals, and currency. But however, sovereign still needed to be subject to limits and controls, because if you give the sovereign authority or the government so much power, there might be a possibility that they will abuse its power. That's why ang gobyerno, kung tagaan mo power, ilahatanan ang authority, ilahatanan ang power, then what will happen if there will be abuses? Okay? What if there is an excessive use of power, excessive exercise of authority? Okay? That's why, in order to somehow balance the power between the government and the people were given these so-called rights and privileges. Okay? And here the English philosopher John Locke played a vital role. He argued that citizens possess natural rights to life, liberty, and property, and that these rights must be protected by rulers governing through law. Basically, the Bill of Rights was created, plus it was created to prevent the government from the abuses, okay, of its officials. Okay, what will happen if the government is so powerful, and then the exercise of its authority would cause or would compromise the rights of the people? Let's say, for example, natamaan yung property mo, kukunin ang property mo without your consent. Okay, that's too much, and that's a violation of our natural right. Okay, even John Locke also, John Locke's political theory also is one of the origins of the Bill of Rights under the Constitution. Diba? Under the Bill of Rights, we have right to travel, okay, right to life, right to property, right to due process, right, equal protection law, right to health, etc., etc. Okay, because this is one way of balancing the power between government and the state. Because if the other entity is so much powerful, then it would perhaps compromise the people. Or if the people would have so much power, then it will, of course, remove the authority or the power of the states. That's why you need to balance this entity. Okay. So I'll continue later.